Hi, I'm Alan Rasmussen, editor of Prospect Magazine, and you're about to watch the interview portion of the latest episode of Media Confidential with myself and Lionel Barber, in which we speak to a special guest. If you want to watch the full episode, please click on the link below, and if you want to subscribe to Prospect Magazine, please visit our website at www.prospectmagazine.co.uk. Enjoy. Well, we're thrilled to be joined now by Kate Conger and Ryan Mack. They've just produced a spectacular book called Character Limit: How Elon Musk Destroyed Twitter. They're both technology reporters based in California for the New York Times. Welcome, Kate and Ryan.
Thank you. We're really excited to speak with you.
Thanks for having us.
Listen, the title is very grabby, and I'm just going to read from your preface, in which you say the obvious, that this story is a developing one. It's not over. But what is clear already, you write, is that Twisk has destroyed the platform. What he owns is no longer Twitter, not in name, but also neither in substance nor in spirit. That seems like a good starting point to this conversation. What do you think he has destroyed? What was Twitter beforehand, and what has he made of it?
I think, there's so much that has changed about Twitter since the takeover. And you could look at just about any facet of the business, either the platform itself, the way conversation is conducted on the platform and the content moderation rules that govern that discourse, to the advertising business, the way the company makes money, and the way that Musk has really destroyed that by burning bridges with advertisers. To the physical location of the offices. Just this week, we're seeing Twitter move out of San Francisco for the first time since its founding. So there really is not, I would say, a portion or a section of the company that has been left untouched at this point.
And this is an extraordinary story of somebody who coveted this organization, desperately wanted to own it, and has botched almost everything about it since he took it over. I mean, if he'd tried deliberately to wreck the thing that he had bought and to destroy its value, he couldn't have tried harder. Can you unwrap that mystery? What conclusion did you reach about what he thought he was doing and why he has so spectacularly misfired?
I think the conclusion we've reached is that, oftentimes with these billionaires or, titans of industry, we think of them having some kind of master plan or, general ideas for what they're going to do when they make these large business decisions. And in this case, we found that Elon Musk, a lot of the time, was just shooting from the hip, from the moment where he said he was going to join the board, but actually he's now going to buy the company. Oh, wait, I don't want to buy the company anymore. I want to back out, to being sued to enforce his purchase agreement and then buying the company and then having to come in and run the place. Like, this was a unprecedented and unexplainable set of, circumstances and decision-making. Like, there was no prior plan here. And I think that is the larger takeaway of this acquisition, that Musk kind of decided on a whim to buy this company for $44 billion. We're talking about, someone who had more money than anyone else on Earth, $250 billion of net worth, and could just decide on a whim to purchase, a major social platform.
But Ryan, let me come in here as a business financial journalist. Isn't the problem that Musk is brilliant when he's founding companies, building something from scratch as a great vision of the electric vehicle industry or SpaceX? Here, he was buying a kind of mature-ish media company, and then he goes and massively overplays. I mean, isn't that part of the problem?
I think that's a great point. And when we think of Elon Musk, he has this view of first principles, like breaking down things to their first principles and asking why he can't do what people tell him he can't do. Why can't I build electric cars and make them a mass market vehicle? Why can't I put rockets into space and privatize the space industry? And when he starts at those first principles and he builds his companies up, like you said, he can do incredible things. I think that's undeniable. He's built two world-leading companies. On On the other hand, he is not someone who does a lot of acquisitions. He does very few at his companies. Notably, he had to acquire Solar City when it was in trouble and run by his cousins, and that didn't go as well as planned. But he's not someone who takes over mature companies, as well as, I think the other principle we have, or the other kind of understanding that we learned in writing this book, is that simply because you are great at electrifying vehicles or getting satellites into space doesn't necessarily make you the person to run a social network. These are very different problems. And I think there was a bit of hubris when he came in and believing that he could, simply understand everything that ailed Twitter. And that just wasn't the case.
Kate, you've obviously looked at this story in great detail. What can you tell us about Elon Musk's editorial mindset?
So I think the initial attraction to Twitter for Elon was that it was a place where he could push back on editorial judgments of others who were writing about him. He liked to use the platform to sort of fact check and bicker with Tesla bloggers and push back on narratives that he didn't like in the media. As an owner of a social media company, I think that his editorial slant is explicitly political. And I think, we've seen that more and more going into the election, where he's using the platform to issue endorsements for a candidate and to boost and engage with voices that are sharing the kinds of content that he wants to see and the political messages that he wants to push. So, it's interesting because we've seen these other social media platforms that are a lot smaller and upstarty that have an explicit right-wing slant. And this is kind of the first time that we've seen that sort of editorial view applied to a major social network like this.
I would also add to that, content moderation for him is sometimes whimsical and unprincipled. He is someone who came in and said, I believe in free speech so much, I'm going to allow an account that tracks the whereabouts of my private jet to stay on the platform, something called Elon Jet. A couple weeks later, he bans that account for providing what he says were assassination coordinates, as well as banning reporters who reported on that account, including myself. Just a kind of 24-hour decision that he wrote up a policy for and started banning people. So this is a man that changes his mind on a day-by-day basis, and we're seeing the impact of that on X today.
Be good to explore the contradictions a bit more. So he portrays himself as anti-government, libertarian, free speech absolutist, if you like. And yet, isn't the reality that Twitter is as cooperative as anybody else, as any of the other platforms in actually quietly cooperating with law enforcement and with governments around the world?
It's interesting with Elon because it sort of depends. X now has continued to be cooperative with the Indian government for takedown requests and to censor content that is not politically approved there. But, we've seen this example recently in Brazil where Musk has basically, been banned from the country because he's refused these requests from government to take down posts that, fit with a political viewpoint that he agrees with. So, I think it's interesting because the company is resistant to take down requests when it suits him and will comply when it's not a fight that he wants to pick.
Can you describe the moment when he took over, and almost the first thing he did was to sack an awful lot of people, including a lot of people who worked in so-called trust and safety. That's the sort of moderation teams and in the curation teams. And you write somewhere that he harbored, he looked at Telegram, which has got more than twice the number of users with a core staff of 30, and wondered why Twitter couldn't be like that. But that seems such a sort of misunderstanding of a public platform like Twitter. Do you think this was just incredible naivety, or, having studied him for all this length of time, did he defeat you in trying to understand it?
I think in understanding Elon Musk, he believes that he can do things a lot more efficiently than anyone else. He can get things, again, down to their first principles. Why do I need this project manager? Why do I need this vice president? I can just eliminate them. I'll do it myself. I can find a way to operate this company a lot better. And he had this view of the previous administration who ran Twitter just being so inept, so corrupt. And if he had simply just cut people, that, Twitter would run way more efficiently. And that applied to things like trust and safety. It applied to engineering. It applied to human resources, to communications. He gutted the whole PR staff, essentially. There's essentially no one that runs press there anymore. I think they've since hired a third party, but, there was a time where there was simply no communications department. And so this Telegram example is really fascinating for us because, yes, it does exhibit a kind of misunderstanding of what Twitter is and what Telegram is. Telegram is a chatting platform, somewhat like WhatsApp, but it's not like a social network in a way, or it is a social network. It's different, but but fundamentally it's different because it doesn't moderate content, it doesn't comply with government requests, and it simply lets unfettered free speech, whatever that is, and Elon and his associates really love that, and he loved that there were only a handful of people maintaining the site. They were like, why can't we do it that way as well? Why can't that be us?
Okay. You referred to Twitter's headquarters in San Francisco, and I can still remember going to that building about 20 years ago, where I had about 45 minutes with Biz Stone. Jack Dorsey wasn't in the building, and him sort of saying, well, we got this kind of thing called Twitter, it's limited characters. We don't quite know how to make any money out of it, but I think it's pretty cool. And now it's this media platform where somebody can have 200 million followers. It reaches around the world, everything. What space does it occupy in the media landscape? Can you measure? Have you been able in your book to measure influence? Talk to us a little bit about what it is today.
Yeah, I think, Twitter is such a fascinating company because it really has never achieved that kind
I should say
X now, yeah. Has never really achieved that kind of scale that, an Instagram or a Facebook or a YouTube has mastered. And it's always been more of a niche platform. But I think that the thing that's so fundamental about Twitter is sort of the immediacy of the conversation that's happening there. And it lends itself so well to major news moments, politics, environmental disasters, things in the moment where people are urgently seeking to be part of that conversation. And I think something else that's so interesting about the platform when we kind of look at it in comparison to other social media services is that Twitter is always stuck to the option of chronological timeline, right? Everywhere else you go on the internet, what you're seeing is controlled by an algorithm that's deciding for you what's the most important thing. And Twitter and now X has always maintained at least the option of going to a full chronology. So when you're in the moment of needing to discuss something, to figure out what everyone else is talking about at that exact moment, it gives you that. And other social platforms won't, because it takes a while for something to bubble up in the algorithm and become popular. So it really has always maintained its importance as a place to have the conversation that you just have to have right now. You got to get something off your chest.
Right. But does it really, do you think, influence political opinion and political debate? And I asked that with a follow-up question linked, which is Elon Musk, in my view, my description, is the kind of owner. He's the CEO, he's the proprietor, the CEO, and he's the editor-in-chief. And in normal media organizations, these roles are separated. So you do have somebody who has enormous power over the platform. The question is, does it matter?
I think yes. I think that, there's a lot of debate about what the actual influence of these platforms are. And I think the most common one that I hear is debate over whether or not Russian interference on these platforms had a measurable impact on the 2016 election. And that's kind of always been something that I think people go back and forth about. But with Twitter and now X, we've seen multiple instances where conversation on the platform has led to real world consequences. I mean, the Arab Spring, January 6th, January 8th in Brazil, recent riots in the UK. These are online conversations that were playing out on Twitter and then began to play out in the real world. And so I think those are areas where it's more direct to track the influence that Twitter has and the way these kind of heated political conversations on the platform play out with real life consequences.
I find the point you made about a CEO also, he is not technically not the CEO there, is a CEO there, but he is the owner of the company. He is the decision maker. But yes, and he still oversees content decisions. He is effectively the EIC. And this is something that, Mark Zuckerberg at Meta, for example, has tried to distance himself from. He's created the oversight board. How I think you're familiar with that. To distance himself from those kind of content moderation decisions that were in a lot of ways bogging him down. But you have Elon, who in some ways relishes this. He wants to be involved with these decisions, and he wants his, imprint to be on those decisions.
Ryan, you're absolutely right that the CEO of X is Linda Yaccarino, hired from New York. But I would submit that the guy who's calling all the shots is the proprietor and the de facto editor-in-chief, Elon Musk.
Of course. And he's the one on stage telling advertisers to go fornicate themselves, if you will. I guess we'll censor ourselves there. But yeah, he's the decision maker.
He's got quite a lot of discretion in his multiple roles. What was the most fascinating thing you found out about Twitter in your book research?
I mean, I think one of the things that is so striking to me about Musk that I think we sort of knew intuitively, but just to see the depths of it was fascinating, is just how little of a plan he had going into any of this, and just some of the wild moments of just a lack of understanding of what was happening. Times where he would say, oh, well, we're not doing this, we're not doing that. And his advisors would have to say, it's in the contract that you signed, you have to do this. And he would be like, oh, okay. But it was apparent that he hadn't read the deal terms when he signed on to it, which I think is just kind of unfathomable to think of spending that kind of money and not reading the terms when you sign the documents.
I think it's called in English, flying by the seat of your pants.
Yes.
On SpaceX.
Yeah, moments like that. I mean, we know that he's reckless and impulsive, but really seeing it in that kind of detail was pretty shocking.
To piggyback off of that, I think we were both fascinated by his disregard for the law. There are several instances in the book where he says, or one of his advisors says, that he doesn't care about the law, that he, what is it to him? He'll pay the fine. And that underlines a larger theme in the book of accountability and our question of how do you hold someone who is worth that much money, $250 billion, how do you hold them accountable? Because every way that the government and regulators around the world have tried to hold him accountable have failed. I think of something like 2018, where he didn't have the same stature. He tried to take Tesla private. He had the very famous tweet. And he gets slapped on the wrist with a $20 million fine. Well, what is $20 million to someone who is worth hundreds of billions, right? This is nothing. There doesn't seem like a way to essentially hold him accountable.
I was going to ask whether you thought the advertisers or the regulators are going to prove more of a problem for him. I mean, he's memorably in the last year told both of them, if you pardon my French, to fuck off. He's told the DSA in Europe to butt out, and the advertisers, they don't like him, they can fuck off to at the same time as suing them for fucking off.
The family podcast, Alan. I think that's enough of your filthy language.
I'm learning that we can curse on this podcast, which is amazing. But
Yeah, anything goes in England, I can tell. Or Britain.
okay,
which is the bigger problem for him.
So, I mean, it seems like the advertising has been a slight problem, but not something that has really modified or changed his behavior in any way. He's sort of compared advertisers not spending on the platform to a form of coercion or bribery, that they're trying to force him to do something. We know from all of our reporting on Elon that he does not like the feeling of being backed into a corner and will lash out. Regulators, maybe. I think that's not a very strong path in the United States.
What about Brazil?
Yeah. So internationally, I think there is a little bit more of a shot for regulation to have an effect. Obviously, the EU has been pursuing X and trying to pressure them on content moderation. And then, of course, the shutdown in Brazil. We've seen the government there take pretty drastic action to try to rein in Elon Musk's behavior. But it's still kind of early days with Brazil, too, to see how long that ban lasts, what the financial impact is for X, and, whether Elon Musk will ultimately cave and remove those accounts that he's being asked to remove in Brazil, or if the Brazilian government will allow him to come back without doing that.
I will say on the advertiser point as well, which is, it's confusing for advertisers. He is now suing some of them for not advertising on the platform. That's an unprecedented move. What does it mean? You have to be forced to spend on a platform to advertise against content you necessarily don't want to advertise against. And that's playing itself out in the courts right now. But, in some ways, advertisers don't know how to deal with a kind of non-rational actor. And we've never seen anyone like this in business before. And yeah, it is a strange situation for them.
Can I ask you both? You've obviously lived with this story for several years now. How do you think it's going to end?
How does this X-rated movie end?
You're such a cliche headline writer.
I think
cursing.
It's wordsmith, Alan. Wordsmith.
I think this continues to play out. He'll continue to make decisions that drive away people, that drive away advertisers. We haven't talked about the amount of debt that he has hanging over the company. He pays more than $1 billion in interest a year on the debt that he's raised to buy the company. I think that, if we're talking about accountability earlier, is like probably the only way to hold him accountable is that financial pressure. But I also think, as a platform, I think it continues to exist in the same way that we see people still having Yahoo Mail accounts. There is still a large subset of people that still like to use the platform and still use it. And he's tailored it to some of those people. And it'll persist, whereas other people have been driven away to other things like Blue Sky and Threads and Instagram. And that's kind of how I see this playing out, kind of a fissuring of the kind of social media landscape.
Yeah, I think, the ending of this story is something that I think gave us probably the most anxiety out of any part of this process. Throughout the writing of the book, hadn't really settled on where to stop. And then we got to where we really had to stop, and our publisher was like, give us your manuscript. And we were like, no, we need 10 more minutes, because we just didn't know what Elon was going to do next. And if a new ending was going to come along that we had to include. And so, I think that's sort of the beauty and also the pain of covering Elon Musk, is you just never know what twists and turns will come. But I think that Ryan is right. We're in this sort of period of slow decay on X, where some people are leaving, some people are still using the platform. And I think that barring some kind of technical collapse where the site just stops working, you're going to continue to see that sort of slow trickle of people leaving over time. And, maybe it becomes the MySpace of this section of the tech industry, something that I used to be addicted to and use every day. And now I don't think about anymore.
Rupert Murdoch's one of his worst investments. What a note to end on.
I've got one final question. After you finished the book, we finally learnt the list of people who originally invested in Musk's venture, which included some Russian names that raised eyebrows. What did you make of those names?
The Russian thing hasn't been proven out. I think the connection was that there are some Russian associates or the children, I think, of oligarchs who work at a venture firm who invested in into the Twitter deal. I think there's a few steps to go before we can, report that there maybe it was Russian interference on or influence on the acquisition of Twitter. And I think, reporting will bear that out. So it kind of remains to be seen. Thankfully, that was one of the biggest holes, to be honest with you, in the book, is we didn't know where all the money was coming from for the deal. There were some disclosures, but it wasn't a complete list. But oddly, it doesn't look like he raised much more money than what we originally thought from other investors. Kind of, he disclosed this list of investors in May 2022. And it didn't look like he picked up many more new names after that. The markets had kind of turned south. He was obviously in that fight with Twitter to, not buy the company, which I'm sure pushed a lot of people away. So there weren't too many unknowns on that list when it finally came out after our book came out.
There's just so many ways in which Elon Musk is conflicted, right? Because of the multiple businesses that he owns, because of the different relationships that he has with governments around the world. And there's a scene in the book right before he fires Vijagati, who was Twitter's top lawyer at the time. She warns him about this stuff and says, you have manufacturing in China for Tesla. What are you going to do if the Chinese government comes to you and asks you to censor content? And when you look at that investor list, there are several like government funds that are invested in X now. And it just adds to the list of conflicts that Elon has to navigate.
Kate and Ryan, you're going to have to write a second volume in a couple of years' time, because this is a story that is going to go on and on. Thank you so much for appearing. The book is called Character Limit. It's a fascinating description of, as the authors describe it, how Elon Musk destroyed Twitter, and I can really recommend it. Thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you, Kate and Ryan, and many congratulations on finishing this book. It's a big one.
Thank you for taking time with it. It's an honor.